Welcome back to Strides to Solutions. I'm Esther Adams, and today we're diving into some cutting edge territory where neuroscience meets animal human interaction. We're exploring whether the bonds we form with animals, particularly the deep interactive relationships many people develop with horses, might actually be rewiring our brains for greater stress resilience. Now, I need to be upfront about something from the start. This is an area where the research is still catching up to what many people intuitively feel and report experiencing. We don't yet have definitive studies showing that regular interaction with horses changes long term neurological markers of resilience in humans. But what we do have is fascinating indirect evidence that suggests this might be exactly what's happening. The question becomes, when people spend time with horses and report feeling more centered, more capable of handling stress, more emotionally regulated, are these just temporary mood boosts? Or could something deeper be occurring at the neurological level? To understand this possibility, we need to start with what we know about stress resilience in the brain. Resilience isn't just about bouncing back from difficult experiences. It's about developing neural flexibility that allows us to adapt, cope, and even grow from challenges. The brain regions most associated with stress resilience include the amygdala, which processes fear and threat detection, the hippocampus, crucial for memory and learning, and several areas of the prefrontal cortex, particularly the ventromedial and anterior cingulate regions, which are involved in emotional regulation and executive control. When these systems work together effectively, we see what researchers call neuroflexibility, the brain's ability to dynamically adjust its responses based on context rather than getting stuck in rigid stress patterns. People with high stress resilience show some distinct neurological patterns. Their amygdala doesn't become hyperreactive to stressors, it responds appropriately but returns to baseline relatively quickly. Their prefrontal cortex maintains good regulatory control even under pressure. Their hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which governs our stress hormone responses, shows flexibility rather than chronic activation. We can measure some of these patterns through heart rate variability, which reflects the balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system activity. High heart rate variability generally indicates good stress resilience. It means your nervous system can shift flexibly between activation and recovery states rather than getting stuck in chronic fight or flight mode. The question is, could regular interaction with animals, particularly horses, help develop these resilient neural patterns? Let me share what we do know about the immediate neurobiological effects of positive animal interactions, because this gives us clues about what might be happening over time. When humans interact with companion animals, several neurochemical systems activate simultaneously. Oxytocin levels increase. This is the hormone associated with bonding, trust, and social connection. Dopamine release occurs, particularly in brain regions associated with reward and motivation. Endogenous opioids are released, contributing to feelings of pleasure and social comfort. At the same time, cortisol levels typically decrease, indicating reduced physiological stress. Blood pressure often drops. Heart rate variability frequently improves, suggesting better autonomic nervous system balance. These aren't just feel good changes, they're exactly the kinds of neurobiological shifts associated with building resilience. Regular activation of oxytocin and dopamine systems, combined with reductions in chronic stress markers, could theoretically promote the kind of neuroplasticity that underlies resilience development. With horses specifically, the research reveals some particularly intriguing patterns. During structured equine assisted therapy, both humans and horses show stable or decreased cortisol levels rather than stress increases. Heart rate variability synchronization can occur between human and horse, especially in familiar bonded pairs. The human nervous system often shifts toward parasympathetic dominance, the rest and digest state associated with recovery and healing. What's particularly interesting is that these effects seem to be relationship dependent. Familiar human horse pairs show stronger physiological synchronization, and better stress responses than unfamiliar pairs. This suggests that the bond itself, not just exposure to horses, drives the neurobiological benefits. But here's where it gets really intriguing: the kinds of skills that equine interaction requires: reading nonverbal cues, staying present and focused, regulating your own emotional state to influence another being, practicing calm assertiveness in uncertain situations. These are precisely the capacities associated with stress resilience. When you're working with a horse, you can't fake your emotional state. Horses are extraordinarily sensitive to human autonomic nervous system changes. If you're anxious, tense, or emotionally dysregulated, the horse will typically respond with wariness or avoidance. To have successful interactions, you must learn to self regulate in real time. This creates what might be called biofeedback training for emotional regulation. The horse becomes a mirror for your internal state, providing immediate feedback about your nervous system activation. Over time, this could theoretically train the prefrontal cortex to maintain better regulatory control, reduce amygdala hyperreactivity, and develop the kind of flexible stress responses characteristic of resilience. The research on what builds stress resilience supports this hypothesis. Resilience develops through experiences that provide manageable challenges within supportive relationships. It requires opportunities to practice coping skills, receive feedback, and gradually build confidence in your ability to handle uncertainty and stress. Horse interaction naturally provides all of these elements. Horses are large, powerful, and somewhat unpredictable, creating manageable challenge. They're also highly social and capable of forming genuine bonds with humans, providing the relational support context. They give immediate, honest feedback about your emotional and physical state, creating opportunities to practice and refine self regulation skills. The bilateral nature of these relationships might be particularly important. You're not just receiving comfort from the horse, you're also learning to provide leadership, comfort, and guidance to another being. This reciprocal caregiving could activate neural circuits associated with what researchers call tend and befriend responses, which are linked to better stress resilience and mental health outcomes. There's also something profound about the mindfulness aspects of horse interaction. Horses live very much in the present moment, and successful interaction with them requires you to do the same. You can't be distracted by past regrets or future anxieties when you're with a horse. They demand presence and attention. This present moment focus is exactly what mindfulness meditation trains, and we know that regular mindfulness practice creates measurable changes in brain structure and function. Areas associated with emotional regulation strengthen, while areas associated with rumination and anxiety show less reactivity. Could regular horse interaction be providing a form of embodied mindfulness training? The kind where you're not just sitting quietly observing your breath, but actively practicing presence and self regulation while navigating a complex, dynamic relationship with another conscious being. The research on neuroplasticity suggests this is entirely plausible. The adult brain retains remarkable capacity for change throughout life, especially in response to consistent, engaging, emotionally meaningful experiences. The combination of physical activity, emotional engagement, social connection, challenge, and immediate feedback that characterizes horse interaction could be ideal conditions for promoting beneficial neural changes. But I want to be clear about the limitations of what we currently know. We don't have longitudinal studies following people who regularly interact with horses to see if their brains show the structural and functional changes associated with increased resilience. We don't have neuroimaging data comparing regular horse handlers to control groups over time. What we have is research showing that horse interaction produces acute neurobiological changes consistent with stress reduction and improved emotional regulation. We have evidence that these effects are relationship dependent and strengthen with familiarity. We have theoretical frameworks suggesting that the skills developed through horse interaction overlap significantly with those underlying stress resilience. This creates a compelling hypothesis, but it remains just that, a hypothesis that needs direct testing. The research gaps are significant enough that I think it's worth considering what kinds of studies might fill them. Ideally, we'd want longitudinal research following people as they begin regular horse interaction programs, measuring neurobiological markers of resilience before, during, and after participation. We'd want neuroimaging studies looking at changes in brain structure and function. We'd want careful control groups to separate the effects of horse interaction from other variables like exercise, outdoor time, or social connection. We might also want to compare different types of animal interaction to see if horses provide unique benefits or if the effects generalize to other animals. The size, intelligence, and social nature of horses might create particularly powerful conditions for resilience development, or similar benefits might be achievable through deep relationships with other animals. Until we have this research, how should we think about the potential resilience benefits of animal interaction? I think there are several reasonable conclusions we can draw. First, the acute neurobiological benefits are well established. If you're looking for evidence based stress reduction, improved heart rate variability, and better emotional regulation in the moment, animal interaction, particularly with horses, has solid research support. Second, the skills developed through animal interaction clearly overlap with those underlying resilience. Whether these skills transfer to better coping with life stresses outside the animal context is an empirical question, but the overlap is theoretically meaningful. Third, the relationship quality matters tremendously. Brief superficial exposure to animals is unlikely to create lasting changes. Developing ongoing, interactive, mutual relationships where you're actively engaged in caregiving and receiving feedback seems necessary for deeper benefits. Fourth, individual differences probably matter significantly. Some people may be more naturally attuned to animal relationships, more motivated to develop these skills, or more likely to transfer learning from animal interactions to human contexts. What does this mean for people considering animal interaction as part of their wellness or healing practice? I think it suggests approaching these relationships as potentially meaningful but not magical. They're not quick fixes or universal solutions, but they might be powerful tools for some people under certain circumstances. If you're drawn to animal interaction, particularly with horses, there's good reason to believe it could support your stress resilience development. The key is approaching it with realistic expectations and genuine commitment to the relationship aspects. This means being prepared for the challenges as well as the benefits. Animals don't always cooperate with our agendas. They have their own needs, moods, and preferences. Building genuine relationships with them requires patience, consistency, and willingness to be emotionally vulnerable. It also means recognizing that animal relationships, like human relationships, work best when they complement rather than replace other sources of support and growth. The person who uses horse interaction to avoid dealing with human relationships or life challenges isn't likely to develop genuine resilience. But for people who approach animal relationships as opportunities for growth, learning, and genuine connection, the potential benefits could be profound. We might not yet have definitive proof that these relationships rewire our brains for resilience, but the indirect evidence is compelling enough to warrant serious consideration. What strikes me most about this research area is how it challenges some of our assumptions about what creates lasting change in human psychology and neurobiology. We often think about resilience development as requiring formal therapy, meditation practice, or structured programs. The possibility that it might also develop through genuine relationships with other species opens up different pathways for healing and growth. It suggests that our brains might be designed to benefit from interspecies connection in ways we're only beginning to understand. The fact that heart rate variability synchronization can occur between humans and horses hints at levels of neurobiological attunement that transcend species boundaries. This doesn't diminish the importance of human relationships or traditional approaches to building resilience. but it might expand our understanding of the conditions under which human brains and nervous systems thrive. As research in this area continues to develop, I suspect we'll discover that the intuitive sense many people have about the transformative power of animal relationships has solid neurobiological foundations. We might find that the bonds we form with other species don't just make us feel better in the moment, they actually help us become more resilient, adaptable, and emotionally flexible humans. For now, that remains an exciting possibility rather than an established fact, but it's a possibility grounded in solid understanding of how resilience develops, how neuroplasticity works, and how the acute effects of animal interaction align with the neurobiological patterns underlying psychological strength. This has been Strides to Solutions. I'm Esther Adams, and thank you for joining me today.